He said, "Just stay with us a while, Mom. We'll take care of everything." I should have known a while meant until I disappeared. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Not the second act of my life, not the ending I had earned. When I first moved into my son's house, it was early spring. Indiana hadn't thawed out yet. Those stubborn patches of snow still clung to the sidewalk like regrets. I remember standing on his porch, suitcase in one hand, cane in the other, while the wind slipped through my coat and reminded me how old I was. Lucas opened the door with that smile he saves for coworkers and tax auditors. "Hey, Mom," he said, stepping aside so I could shuffle in. "It's just temporary. Until your hip gets better." That was the line. Just temporary. I clung to that phrase like it was a promise. Because if you can't trust your only son when your bones are broken and your house is too quiet, then who can you trust? He helped me up the stairs, well, followed behind really, and showed me to the guest room. "It's not much," he said, and he was right. A narrow twin bed, a dresser missing a handle, no curtains on the window, just a pull-down shade that curled at the bottom like a bad secret. Still, I told myself it was fine. I told myself a lot of things in those first few days, that I was lucky to have a place, that Lucas was busy, not distant, that the meals were just different, not odd, that the silence was peaceful, not surgical. I kept my head down and my hands folded. I'd been taught better than to complain. 3 weeks before that, I had slipped in my bathroom, reaching for a hand towel. Wet tile, wrong shoes, a loud crack in my hip, and a louder one in my pride. I lay on the floor for nearly 40 minutes before the neighbor knocked. It wasn't the pain that broke me. It was the way no one expected me anywhere. The hospital kept me for 4 nights. My insurance didn't love that. Neither did Lucas. But he came, suit pressed, hair perfect, voice smooth. He sat beside me and said all the right things. "We don't want you alone in that big old house, Mom. It'll just be for a bit. Let me help, please." He used the word "we" a lot. "We'll make it work. We'll take care of you," but it became clear pretty quickly that we didn't include his wife. She wasn't even there when he helped me into the car after discharge. Just a quiet living room and a note on the fridge. "Work late. Leftovers in the microwave." The first night, I lay awake in the guest room staring at the ceiling, listening to their footsteps above. The walls here were thinner than my patience. I could hear Lucas laugh at something on TV, then hear silence. A long stretch of it. It reminded me of when he was little. How he used to whisper goodnight through the bedroom wall to me after I'd tuck him in. "Night, Mommy," he'd say, soft and certain. He hadn't called me Mommy in decades. These days, it was Mom on good days, Ma on practical ones, and nothing at all if he was in a rush. I tried not to take it personally. Really, I did. I told myself, he's tired, he's under pressure. This isn't easy for him either. So I folded my socks, adjusted to the new schedule, and kept quiet. But even then, even in that first week, there were signs. Lucas changed my prescriptions to be mailed to the house, then forgot to hand them to me for 3 days. He locked the front door with a new code and never mentioned it. He told his friends on the phone that I was a little fuzzy lately, like I couldn't hear him just down the hall. These were small things, but small things pile up, like snow, or lies, or shame. And while I didn't know it yet, I was already living the first chapter of a revenge story. Not one filled with fire or fury, but the kind that begins quietly, between spoonfuls of silence and side glances that slice. The room they gave me had no mirror. At first, I thought they'd just taken it down. Maybe it had cracked. Maybe they were painting. But no. Lucas told me straight-faced one evening, "It's safer that way, Mom. You don't want to trip over anything." As if reflections were hazards, as if I'd forgotten how to see myself. So I used the back of a soup spoon one night, just to check. My eyes still looked like mine. Tired, yes, but sharp. Looking back now, I wonder what would have happened if I had said something then. If I had spoken up when the meals started tasting strange. When the dog licked its lips every time I sat at the table. When Lucas said, "It's just temporary," but moved my name to the bottom of the mailbox. But I didn't. Because I was tired. Because I was taught to endure. Because love makes you blind to slow cruelty. Or maybe because part of me believed I had to earn my place, even in my own son's house. I didn't know then what was coming. The food, the plan, the forged signature, the legal documents behind my back, the quiet war they were waging without saying a word. But I was still Florence Madsen. I had raised a boy. I had buried a husband. I had held back tears through funerals and birthings and lonely birthdays, and I would hold back again. Until the moment I didn't have to anymore. Until the moment they heard me. Not because I shouted, but because I finally stopped whispering. The first thing I noticed was the silence, not the kind that comes with peace, but the kind that settles in a house like dust in corners. Quiet so sharp you can hear your own stomach churn. No one spoke at breakfast, not even Lucky, the little mutt Lucas and his wife adored more than their own wedding photos. It started slow. The food. My first dinner there was beige. That's the only word I had for it. Beige meat, beige potatoes, something green boiled into a color I wouldn't name. There were no spices, no garlic, no love, but I told myself not to be ungrateful. It's just different from how I cook, I muttered to myself, lifting a forkful of something rubbery. Everyone eats lighter now. Maybe this is health food. Except health food shouldn't smell like metal. One evening, Lucas brought me a bowl of what he called nutrient stew. High protein, easy to digest, he said, made special for older folks. He set it down like he was offering me some sort of gift, smiled that shallow smile of his, and walked off without waiting for me to eat. I leaned in, letting the steam hit my face. It didn't smell like stew. It smelled like the inside of a can. There was a strange sweetness in the air, faint but cloying, like something artificial trying hard to mimic something real. I stirred the bowl slowly and noticed how the broth clung to the spoon, thick, gelatinous. Across the kitchen, Lucky licked his chops and wagged his tail. His bowl looked identical to mine. I blinked. Surely not. After a few nights of that same paste, sometimes brown, sometimes gray, always suspicious, I decided to test something. I didn't eat, just pushed the food around with my spoon, let it sit there while I made small talk with the walls. No one noticed. No one asked if I liked it. No one cared if I finished. That's when it sank in. These meals weren't meant to nourish. They were meant to pacify, to shut me up without shutting me down. Lucas barely looked at me during meals. He'd ask general questions. How's your hip? Or, did you nap today? But never waited for the answer. Sometimes when he was in a good mood, he'd pull out his phone and show me memes I didn't understand. And sometimes, in a really good mood, he'd pat my shoulder and say, "You're doing great, Mom. Keep it up." Keep what up? Surviving? Pretending not to taste the truth? I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that maybe this was all in my head, that maybe I was tired, out of sorts, adjusting. But then came the third week. I found a locked bin under the sink. Plastic, lidded, airtight. Next to it, a scoop. Not for flour, not for sugar, for pet food. I wasn't imagining it. I knew the smell now. I could name it. I took a photo on my phone. Just one. Didn't even know why at the time. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not just because of my hip aching or the thermostat always being set too low, but because of something deeper, something colder. You ever feel like your body's in a room, but your name isn't? Like you're present, but invisible? I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the house breathe without me. No one came to say goodnight. No one checked on whether I needed anything. And suddenly, I felt like I had been uninvited from my own life. If you're still here, watching this, I want to ask you something. Have you ever sat at a dinner table and realized no one really sees you anymore? That your chair is filled, but your presence is empty to them? If that hits close to home, you're not alone. You're not invisible, even if they try to make you feel that way. The next morning, I heard Lucas on the phone with someone. "Yeah, it's been tough. She's declining faster than we thought. Some memory issues, getting confused about the microwave and TV remote." I stood in the hallway, still in my robe, listening through the vent like I used to when he was a teenager sneaking phone calls. Except now, I wasn't a mother trying to protect her child. I was a woman trying to survive her child's decisions. That same day, the fridge was locked. A keypad, a full-on digital lock on a stainless steel fridge like we were living in Fort Knox. I stood there, stunned, staring at it. New security thing, Lucas explained casually. Some leftovers were spoiling too fast, just a precaution. A precaution? Against what? Me stealing a slice of bread? I didn't argue, didn't frown. I just said, smart thinking, and turned around slowly like my bones were made of fog. But inside, something settled, something old and steady and furious, without flames. That night, I opened the Notes app on my phone, typed, Tuesday, 6:48 p.m., bowl identical to Lucky's, brown, sticky, metallic smell. Fridge locked, code unknown. Lucas told someone I was confused. I'm not. And I renamed the file, Knitting Patterns, Church Fundraiser. No one would ever open that, not until I was ready for them to. It was Thursday. I remember because Lucas always worked late on Thursdays, and the house got quieter than usual. The kind of quiet that crawls under your skin and whispers, "You're not supposed to be here." Melissa wasn't home either. She was out for a wellness class, according to the calendar on the fridge, which I couldn't open anyway. The keypad still blinked red when I got too close. So it was just me and Lucky, the Cocker Spaniel with the perfect coat and better dietary options than me. That night, Lucas said he'd bring me something light. I waited at the dining table, a long, glossy thing I was never allowed to eat at when they had guests. It was always a tray in the guest room. But tonight, he brought the bowl to me like it was something sacred. He didn't say what it was. He didn't have to. The moment the smell hit me, I knew. It was the same scent I'd been noticing in waves. Sweet, metallic, wrong. Thick steam rose from the bowl in lazy spirals. I stirred it slowly. The liquid clung to the spoon like paste. Brown, lumpy, with a shimmer that reminded me of motor oil. From the corner of the room, Lucky sat perfectly still, eyes locked on my bowl, his tail gently swishing the hardwood floor. I didn't want to believe it. I lifted the spoon anyway. My hand shook. Not from the age this time, but from something colder, older, something I hadn't felt since I was a girl growing up poor in a steel town, where survival taught you to taste first and ask later. I let the spoon hover at my lips, then I took a bite. The texture hit first, gritty, like sand and gravy. Then the flavor, if you could call it that. A strange sweetness undercut by something sour and metallic, like canned pennies boiled in broth. I sat still, didn't chew, didn't swallow, just held the spoon in my mouth and let the shame bloom in the back of my throat like smoke. Across the table, Lucky let out a soft whine. His bowl, ceramic, bone-shaped, was filled with the same brown mush. I set the spoon down, careful not to clatter. Mon Dieu, I whispered under my breath. Not because I'm French, but because some disgust deserves a language softer than English. Lucas was at the sink, rinsing out another dish. He glanced over and said, "How's dinner, Mom? It's organic." Very gentle on the system. I turned to look at him. He wasn't even pretending anymore. "That's kind of you," I said, my voice low. He didn't catch the chill in my tone, or maybe he didn't care. Lucky eats the same blend, keeps him spry. And hey, you're both on the same schedule, right? He chuckled, then dried his hands and walked out of the kitchen without another word. I sat there for a while, longer than I meant to, long enough for the food to grow cold and congeal, forming a skin on top like it was trying to cover its own shame. I stirred it again, watched it pull at the spoon like glue. Then I reached for a napkin, folded it neatly, and quietly scooped out 2 spoonfuls into it. Folded it again, slipped it into my robe pocket. Evidence. Proof. My pride wanted me to throw it all in the trash and pretend I never sat there at all. But something deeper held me still. I'd fed a family on beans and rice during layoffs, made roasts from marked down meat, sewed my own curtains, hemmed their school uniforms. There wasn't a thing in this world I hadn't sacrificed in the name of love. But never, never had I fed someone I loved humiliation on a spoon. Later that night, I crept back to the kitchen, Not to eat, not to clean, but to dig. I pulled the trash can out from under the sink. Lucas had layered it well. Napkins, tea bags, avocado peels, all the signs of a modern, health-conscious home. But deeper down, I found the cardboard. A shipping box, torn edges, faint branding in gold foil over fake wood grain. Gourmet pet nutrition, chicken and peas, 24-pack, not for human consumption. I exhaled through my nose. Just once. Then I found the can, half covered in a paper towel, the label still intact, and under the barcode, a warning in small print. Not suitable for elderly care, intended for canine use only. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I took a picture. Flash off. No sound. Just proof. Then I put the can back exactly where I found it, walked to my room, and locked the door. That night, lying in bed, I remembered every meal I'd ever made Lucas. His favorite, cornbread chili bake, how he used to scrape the bowl, how he once wrote a second-grade essay called "My Mom Makes Magic in the Kitchen." Now here I was, feeding on the scraps of his convenience. Not out of necessity, but out of design. He didn't forget how to love me. He just decided not to. The next morning, I forgot where the sugar was. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, staring blankly at the cabinets. Lucas walked in mid-yawn, coffee already in hand, and watched me for a beat. "The sugar's in the left one, Mom," he said, sounding more amused than annoyed. "Oh," I blinked slowly. "I could have sworn it used to be in the fridge." He gave a little chuckle, the kind you give a toddler who's put their shoes on the wrong feet. "You're tired. We all forget things." I smiled back. Warm, empty, exactly what he wanted to see. From that day on, I let him believe I was fading. Not fast, just enough to explain the soft confusion in my eyes, the way my hands sometimes trembled on the coffee cup, or how I'd pause mid-sentence and look like I'd lost my place. "Did you say it's Monday or Tuesday, sweetheart?" I'd ask, tilting my head just enough to seem sweet, not threatening, and he'd answer gently but firm, "It's Wednesday, Mom." "Of course it is," I'd say, and return to stirring my tea like nothing was wrong, but everything was wrong. Lucas was starting to enjoy it. That's what scared me most. He started saying things in front of me he never would have said even a month before. "Yeah, her memory's slipping. It's tough," he told someone on the phone one afternoon. "We're looking into options. She shouldn't be on her own anymore." I was standing 10 feet away, folding napkins. He didn't even lower his voice. Later that night, I caught him reading something on his laptop. His back was to me. I moved slowly, quietly, pausing just behind the living room arch. The screen showed a website for elder care facilities. One tab read, "Preparing legal consent for incapacitated parents." My stomach dropped like a rock in a well. Not a nursing home brochure, not a helpful resource page. He was looking at guardianship paperwork. That night, I opened my secret phone, the one Clara helped me get years ago when I first moved to Indiana, just in case. A second number, different name, paid in cash. It had stayed hidden in a shoebox, under old receipts and forgotten socks. Now it had a purpose again. I started taking notes, the real kind. Thursday, 9:14 p.m., Lucas reviewing elder legal forms. Friday, 11:23 a.m., told delivery man I was in early stages of dementia. Saturday, 7:05 p.m., locked fridge. Password still unknown. Sunday, 6:50 p.m., fed Lucky first. My bowl came from same countertop, same smell. But notes weren't enough. I needed faces, documents, proof he couldn't deny. So I waited until he left for work Monday morning, then carefully entered his home office. I didn't snoop. I looked. There's a difference. Inside a file labeled Mom, I found printed emails between him and a geriatric consultant. One email asked about accelerated legal clearance for medical guardianship. "If my mother is showing signs of cognitive decline," Lucas wrote, "can I apply for full medical decision-making authority? I'm concerned about her confusion becoming dangerous." He attached no medical records, no diagnosis, just words, assumptions, lies. There was also a pre-filled intake form for a facility 30 miles away, a checkbox already marked, "Resident may resist admittance due to diminished awareness of own condition." That's when it hit me. He wasn't just waiting for me to decline. He was crafting it. He wanted to build a paper trail of incompetence so no one would question why I was locked away somewhere in a room that didn't smell like anything but bleach and neglect. I wasn't just a burden. I was an obstacle. I took photos of everything, emails, intake forms, timestamps, and sent them to my secret email account. I labeled the folder safe. I went back to my room, closed the door softly, and sat on the edge of the bed. I wasn't crying. Not exactly. It was something slower, deeper, like my soul was sighing through every bone in my body. That afternoon, Lucas came home early. He brought me a special smoothie and told me I looked tired. I told him, "I couldn't remember where I put my book today." He smiled. "That's okay. I'm keeping an eye on everything." I nodded. "I know you are." For the next week, I leaned into the role. I forgot names. I lost the remote. I called the TV the oven and let him think I mistook the toaster for the phone. All the while, I was sharpening my mind like a blade. I memorized his work schedule, learned the pattern of his password entry, took silent photos of his deliveries, and saved every can label I could sneak out. He thought I was unraveling, but I was weaving. A case, a memory map, a trap. By the end of that week, I renamed my knitting notes folder. It now read, Florence Madsen, Timeline of Care, because that's what this was. Not a diary, not a dream, a record of love turned rancid, of silence stretched too long, of a son who thought pretending to care would always be enough. The call wasn't dramatic. There were no tears, no trembling voice, just 4 words said slow, clear, like a truth finally permitted to breathe. "Clara, I need you." There was a pause on the other end, then, "Grandma, is everything okay?" I could picture her, sitting cross-legged on a dorm bed in Chicago, or maybe curled up at her off-campus studio with a dozen law books cracked open. 25 years old, sharp as a tack and just as overworked, but she was always good at listening. The kind of girl who looked you in the eye and made you feel like your words had weight. "I don't think so," I whispered. "I don't think things are okay at all." Clara didn't ask for details right away. That's how I knew she was the right person to call. She just said, "I'm coming this weekend." And she did. Showed up Saturday morning with a canvas tote full of highlighters and folders and her favorite lemon muffins from a bakery 2 towns over. She hugged me like I was breakable, which I suppose I was. But then she looked me square in the eye and said, "Whatever it is, we're not going to pretend it didn't happen." And for the first time in weeks, I exhaled fully. I waited until Lucas left to get his car serviced. We had 3 hours, maybe 4 if the mechanic was generous. Clara and I sat at the kitchen table, the one they never let me use when company was over. I spread out my notes, my photos, my screenshots, laid them like puzzle pieces between us. Clara didn't speak for a long time. She just read, scrolled through the emails I'd photographed, traced her finger along the barcode image from the pet food can, tilted her head at the intake form Lucas had already filled out for a care facility I'd never agreed to step foot in. And when she finally looked up, her face was pale with anger. "This is elder abuse, Grandma," she said softly. "It's calculated. It's targeted. It's not just neglect. He's trying to have you declared legally incompetent so he can move you and take control." I nodded. I'd known it. But hearing it out loud, in the voice of someone who believed me, did something strange to my chest. A knot loosened. The ache uncurled just a little. Clara took a deep breath and pulled a yellow legal pad from her bag. "We're going to document everything, line by line, time-stamped, corroborated. If this goes to court, it can't just be your word against his." "But it is my word," I said. "And your word is enough," she replied, setting her pen to the page. "But we're going to make it undeniable." That afternoon, we built a timeline. Date I moved in, first time I tasted the odd stew. Date the fridge got locked. Day I caught Lucas on his laptop researching medical guardianship. She wrote it all down in clean block letters, then added categories: financial control, dietary neglect, emotional manipulation, digital surveillance. We printed labels for each. The house had become a crime scene, and we were processing it. When Lucas came home, Clara greeted him like nothing had changed. "Hey, Uncle Luke," she said sweetly, giving him a quick hug. "Thought I'd surprise Grandma this weekend." He smiled that politician's smile and said, "That's great, kiddo. She's been doing okay." I watched her eyes tighten just slightly, but she didn't flinch. "Yeah," she replied, "but I think she's been lonely. Good thing she's got me now." Lucas didn't know it, but the game had changed. He wasn't just dealing with a tired old woman anymore. He was dealing with a witness. That night, Clara and I sat in my room, the door locked behind us, and started building a case. She pulled out her laptop and showed me how to upload everything to a cloud drive under a fake account name. "Even if they find your phone, they won't find this," she said. "And even if they do, everything's time-stamped. Everything matches. They can't say it's fabricated." We added new items each day. Grocery bills showing Lucas bought almost no fresh food, delivery receipts from the pet food supplier, notes about conversations where Lucas made subtle suggestions I was declining. By Monday, Clara had drafted a preliminary legal brief. "This is just for reference," she said, "but if anything escalates, we're ready to move. Fast." I looked down at the folder in front of me. Heavy, full, real. "Clara," I asked quietly, "what if no one believes me?" She smiled, not kindly, but fiercely. "They will, because now you're not the only one saying it." I didn't sleep much that week, but it wasn't fear that kept me up. It was purpose. Every hour I lay awake, I thought of something else I remembered. A time, a phrase, a look on Lucas's face. And every time I did, I typed it into my phone. Not under knitting notes anymore. Now it lived in a new file. Truth under oath. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't just surviving. I was preparing. It was Lucas's birthday. A Saturday in early fall. Crisp air, golden light, leaves starting to dry around the edges. I used to love this time of year. Used to say October was God's way of apologizing for February. But this year, October came wrapped in silence and slow betrayal. The house was buzzing from the moment I woke up. Melissa had her hair tied up in a silk scarf and was scrubbing the baseboards like a magazine crew was coming to photograph them. Clara and I exchanged a glance as she passed us with a spray bottle that smelled like artificial lemons and nerves. "Dinner's at 6, she said sharply. "Family only, casual but classy. Please don't wander." She didn't look at me when she said it. Just aimed the words at the air between us like a warning. Lucas's birthday dinners used to be noisy affairs. When he was a kid, I'd bake a chocolate cake from scratch. Extra cocoa, no frosting, just powdered sugar and love. He used to run into the kitchen at 6 a.m. on his birthday and yell, "Is it ready yet?" This year, I wasn't asked to cook. I wasn't even asked to help. Instead, I was told very clearly that I'd be eating in the den. "Just for tonight," Lucas said, avoiding my eyes. "It's easier. You understand, right, Mom?" I nodded and smiled. Of course I did. By 5:45, the house was spotless. Melissa wore a cream blouse that shimmered like she wanted people to know she bought it new for the occasion. Lucas had a blue button-down tucked too tight into khakis and a nervous smile that didn't reach his eyes. Guests started to arrive. Lucas's co-workers, a cousin or two, a few neighbors from the HOA board. All people who thought they knew him. All people who greeted me politely, if at all. I stayed in my corner, in my chair near the patio door, sipping lukewarm tea and pretending not to hear the laughter coming from the other room. Clara sat beside me, calm as a breeze. "You okay?" she whispered. I nodded once. "Let's give him a birthday he won't forget." The plan was simple. After the cake was served, after the polite clinking of forks and the last, "This is delicious," echoed through the room, Clara would stand up, and we would let the truth speak for itself. At 7:12, it began. Clara rose from her chair and tapped her glass lightly with a spoon. "Excuse me, everyone," she said, voice steady. "Before we wrap up this lovely evening, my grandmother and I wanted to share a little something with the family." Lucas blinked, confused. Melissa froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips. A slideshow. Clara smiled. Some family history, a few memories, a few recent developments. She pulled a small projector from her tote bag and set it on the side table, plugged it into the outlet. The lights dimmed. A hush fell. The first slide lit up the wall. PetSupplyDeluxe.com. Monthly subscription confirmation, gourmet dog food, not for human consumption. There were murmurs, some soft laughter. Lucas chuckled awkwardly. "What is this?" he asked. Slide 2. A photo of Lucky and me eating side by side, our bowls identical. Slide 3. The ingredient list, highlighted in red, not intended for elderly care. Slide 4. Lucas's email requesting legal guardianship, citing cognitive decline. Melissa stood. "Okay, that's enough. This is a party, not some weird intervention." Clara ignored her. Slide 5. Handwritten notes. Time-stamped. Fridge locks, medication delays. Slide 6, a video clip, me scooping food from my bowl, sealing it in a napkin. Slide 7, an invoice showing my Social Security funds being transferred to cover mortgage and utilities. Lucas claimed he paid himself. The room was silent now. Even the air seemed to stop moving. "This," Clara said quietly, "is what elder exploitation looks like. Hidden in polite smiles, served on porcelain plates, packaged as concern." I stood, slowly, not shaky, not unsure, and I looked at my son. "Happy birthday, Lucas," I said. "I hope your cake tastes better than what you've been feeding me." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I took the folder from Clara, thick, labeled, undeniable, and set it gently on the table. I kept quiet because I thought that's what mothers do, but I see now that silence only feeds the wrong people. Dear, if you're watching this and you've ever kept your mouth shut just to keep the peace, let me ask you something. Was it really peace, or was it fear, dressed up in politeness? Because there comes a day, just one, when you realize the only way they'll listen is if you stop whispering. I turned toward the room, those who looked at me with pity, those who looked away, those who saw me for the first time in years. "This is my house," I said softly. "Paid for with my money, my labor, my sacrifices. And this is me, taking it back." I walked out of the room, past the cake, past the wine, past the guests who didn't know where to look. Clara followed. Behind me, the truth sat on the coffee table like a bomb with no sound. I didn't sleep that night, not because of what had happened, but because of what hadn't. No yelling, no apology, no knock on my door, just silence. The kind of silence you hear in hospitals, right after they tell you someone didn't make it. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking back to every birthday I ever planned for Lucas. The years I stayed up frosting cakes after double shifts. The piñata I made out of newspaper and flour paste when he turned 7. The year I sold my engagement ring to pay for the bicycle he wanted so badly at 15. And now, he gave me a bowl of humiliation and called it health food. The next morning, I made my coffee slow. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Clara was still asleep upstairs. Melissa had already left for her bar class, her yoga mat rolled up by the door like nothing happened. Lucas was at the table, scrolling his phone. He looked up when I walked in, eyes tired, shoulders tense. "Morning," he said, like it was just another day. "Morning," I replied, then sat across from him and took a sip. We didn't speak for a long time. Then he cleared his throat. "Last night, that was a lot." I nodded. "Truth usually is." He glanced down, tap, tap, tap on his phone screen. Then he stopped. "Mom, did you really think I meant to hurt you?" That was it. That question. It came out so small, so quiet, like he wanted me to reach across the table and make it all okay. Like I was still the woman who'd bandage his scraped knees and say, "It's all right, sweetheart, you didn't mean it." But I wasn't her anymore. Or maybe I still was, but not for him. "I think," I said carefully, "you meant for me to disappear. Slowly. quietly, without making it inconvenient for anyone. He flinched, just barely. You didn't hit me. You didn't scream at me. You just stopped seeing me. That's what hurt. He looked away. I didn't know it had gotten that bad. You knew enough to lie, I interrupted softly. To lock the fridge, to fake my decline. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. You fed me shame, Lucas, on a spoon. I stood up then. My legs trembled a little. Not from age this time, but from everything I was done carrying. I won't fight you, Lucas. I won't raise my voice. But I'm leaving, he blinked. Leaving? The house is mine. The silence is yours. You can stay in it if you want, but I won't. He opened his mouth again, but no words came. I'd seen that look before, on his face when he was 5 and realized he'd broken the neighbor's window with a baseball. It wasn't just guilt. It was the weight of realizing actions had consequences. Except this wasn't a window. It was me. That afternoon, I packed light. A small bag, a few clothes, my phone, my folder of evidence, and a necklace Clara gave me when she was 10, made of plastic beads and spelled Best Graham. I didn't need much. After all these years, I'd finally learned, it's not what you leave behind that defines you. It's what you walk away from. As I waited by the front door, Clara came down the stairs. She looked at me, then at the house, then back again. You sure? I've never been surer. She took my bag, held my arm, and together we stepped out into the fading light of a house I had once built with love, and now left with dignity. Clara's apartment wasn't big, but it was warm. That's the first thing I noticed as I stepped through the door. A kind of warmth that didn't come from a thermostat, but from intention. A quilt thrown over the couch, a small lamp with a yellow glow, a cat curled up on a windowsill like it belonged there, like it had always belonged. His name's Tofu, Clara said, setting my bag down gently. He's half blind, but bossy. I smiled. Sounds familiar. She grinned and helped me out of my coat. You can stay as long as you want, Grandma. No time limits, no locked refrigerators. I didn't say anything right away. I just let my hand run along the back of the couch, feeling the soft fabric, the worn thread. Every corner of that little apartment had signs of life. Pictures of Clara's college graduation, postcards from places she hadn't visited yet, sticky notes on the fridge with grocery lists written in loopy cursive. It was messy, lived in, real, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was somewhere that remembered me. That night, Clara made dinner. It wasn't fancy, just grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup from a can. But she cut the crusts off my bread without asking, just like I used to do for her. You always said the corners were the driest. She shrugged. I did, I said softly. You remembered? Of course I did. We ate at the little dining table by the window. A candle flickered between us, lavender and something citrusy. The soup was warm, the cheese was too melty. The dishes didn't match. It was perfect. Afterward, I sat in her rocking chair, blanket over my knees, and watched the cat snore softly under the heater vent. Clara handed me a cup of peppermint tea and sat on the floor like she used to when she was a kid, back when her hair was in pigtails and her knees were always scraped. I'm sorry it took me so long, she said. For what? For not seeing it sooner, for not checking in, for not being there. I reached over and touched her cheek. You came when it mattered. And that was true. She came back when I was still standing, still able to speak my name with clarity, still able to claim what they thought they had erased. That night, I slept in a bed with real sheets, not hospital linens, not stale guest room covers, just soft cotton that smelled faintly of detergent and lavender. No one knocked on the door to check what I was doing. No locks, no footsteps pacing outside my room, just stillness and safety. In the morning, Clara made coffee and opened the window a crack. Birdsong drifted in with the breeze. She passed me a newspaper and said, "It's trash, but it's local." I laughed. Just like us. Later that afternoon, we sat together and went through the folder again, not to prepare, Not this time. To remember, to own it. Because everything in that folder, every receipt, every note, every photo, it wasn't just evidence. It was a record of my strength, of my silence that wasn't weakness, of my memory that hadn't failed me. There's something sacred about being believed and something powerful about being seen, not just as a mother, not just as a dependent or a burden or a background character in someone else's story, but as yourself. Fully, fiercely, finally, Clara looked at me across the table that day and said, "I think this is the first time I've ever seen you not taking care of someone else." I smiled. That's because, for once, someone is taking care of me now. The first letter went out on a Thursday. Clara printed it on thick ivory paper, tucked it into a crisp white envelope, and placed it carefully in the outgoing mail tray at her law firm. She didn't say much, just looked at me with steady eyes and said, "It starts now." 2 days later, Lucas received it, a formal notice of revocation, power of attorney, emergency access, any and all financial involvement, stripped, not because I hated him, but because I was alive. And I finally remembered what that meant. Clara helped me meet with a local elder law attorney, Ms. Holbrook, a retired judge who had seen too many women like me sitting across her desk with the same look in their eyes, the quiet, aching look of someone who's been erased inside their own home. We brought the folder. Ms. Holbrook flipped through it slowly. Barcode labels, screenshots, email transcripts, handwritten notes in my shaky pen. She didn't interrupt once. When she finished, she closed the folder and looked at me for a long time. "This, she said, tapping the cover gently, "is not just documentation. This is your voice, on paper, and I'm going to make sure they hear it." The next letter went to Lucas's employer, and the next to the county clerk's office, revoking guardianship proceedings he'd filed behind my back. Then came the cease and desist. And finally, the quiet call to Adult Protective Services. No press, no shouting, no revenge speech, just paperwork and silence. The kind that shakes walls. I didn't want to sue him. That's the truth. I didn't want a courtroom scene or tabloid drama. I just wanted it on record, that I was not confused, that I was not disposable, that what they did had a name, and that name was abuse. 1 week later, Lucas called. He didn't say hello, just, "I got the letter." I stayed quiet. "You really think I deserve this?" "I don't need to think," I replied. "I lived it." There was silence. "You're my mother. And you treated me like a burden." He breathed heavily into the phone. I could tell he wanted to argue, to explain, to twist, but the paper trail didn't lie. The locks on the fridge didn't lie. The stolen money didn't lie. And for once, neither did I. "I'm not coming back, Lucas. I never meant for it to go that far, but you let it. I know some people still wonder, why didn't I just forgive him? Why didn't I let it go? He's your son after all." And maybe you're watching this thinking the same. But let me ask you, have you ever looked in the mirror and realized someone taught you to feel small just so they could feel tall? Have you ever loved someone so much you let them write over your name until you couldn't hear it anymore? If you have, then you understand why sometimes silence isn't peace, it's punishment, and why speaking up isn't revenge, it's rescue. By the end of the month, Lucas's bank access was revoked. The mortgage he'd attached my name to without consent? Flagged. The state began an inquiry into misuse of elder funds. None of it was loud, none of it messy, just inevitable. That winter, I sat in Clara's apartment, knitting something for the first time in years, not because someone asked, but because I wanted to. The yarn was soft, the needles were steady, my name was mine again. The first time Melissa came to visit Clara's apartment, she brought a bag of groceries and an apology smile. Not the kind that says, "I'm sorry." The kind that says, "Let's move on so I can stay comfortable." She placed the bag on the counter like she had a right to be there. "Thought you could use some fresh fruit," she said brightly. "Organic. From that little place off Market Street you like." Clara stood behind me, arms crossed. I stayed seated in the rocking chair. "You remembered what I like?" I asked. Of course, she said too fast. She sat across from me like nothing had ever happened. No dog food, no locked pantry, no whispered comments about my confused state or early signs of decline. Just smiles and peaches. Lucas is having a hard time, she said after a pause. He's not sleeping. He's lost weight. You know how he gets, all internalized. I sipped my tea, didn't say a word. I know things got weird, she continued, but you're his mom, and he misses you. I miss you. That part? That stung a little. Because there was a time I really believed Melissa was trying, back when she used to ask about my cornbread recipe or help fold laundry while Lucas watched the game. Before her tone started shifting, before I became that woman in the guest room. You fed me dog food, Melissa, I said calmly. Her smile twitched. It was an accident. Lucas was supposed to label it. You both laughed. She opened her mouth, closed it. Clara didn't move, didn't need to. Silence was protection now, not punishment. He thinks if you'd just come home, Melissa said, we could fix things. Home, I repeated. Interesting word. She shifted. You know what I mean. Do I? I set my tea down and leaned forward slowly. You two didn't want me home. You wanted me manageable, quiet, tired, foggy. So I couldn't interfere. So I couldn't remember the things I paid for, signed for, built with my own hands. It wasn't like that. Wasn't it? She stood, flustered now. I just wanted to say we're sorry, that's all. You didn't say it, I replied. You just brought fruit and hoped I'd forget. There was a long pause. Then she said the one thing I didn't expect. You're not the only one he's done this to. The room went still. What? She looked down. His ex. Years ago. Before me, her dad got sick. Lucas helped with bills, then took over her father's finances. Said it was temporary. She didn't notice until it was too late. And you stayed? I thought I was different. I didn't feel pity for her. Not exactly. But I did feel something close to recognition. Because once upon a time, I thought I was different too. You should leave, I said gently. Not this apartment. That life. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear behind the mascara. The kind that wasn't about losing control, but about realizing she never had it. She nodded once, didn't say goodbye, just left. That evening, Clara said nothing, just sat beside me on the couch and passed me a square of chocolate from the freezer. We sat there for a long time. No TV, no music, just quiet. Do you think she'll really leave him? Clara asked eventually. I don't know, I answered, but at least now she knows. Not everyone who smiles is safe. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant. I hadn't been inside one in years, not since jury duty in my 40s. Back then, I wore pumps and a silk blouse. Today, it was orthopedic flats and a cardigan Clara insisted I borrow. She said it made me look trusted. I told her, I don't need to look trusted, I just need to be heard. Ms. Holbrook met us on the front steps. No-nonsense gray suit, a folder under one arm, and calm in her voice like she'd done this 1,000 times. You ready? She asked. Born ready, I said, and meant it. We weren't filing a lawsuit, not yet, but we were submitting a formal affidavit to the probate court, correcting every falsehood that Lucas and Melissa had slipped into the records. They said I was unstable. I handed over my psychiatric clearance. They said I had memory loss. I handed over my cognitive test results. They said I couldn't manage money. I handed over proof that I'd paid the first 3 years of Lucas's mortgage. In other words, I gave them their story. Now, I was giving them the truth. We sat in a small hearing room. No judge yet, just us and a clerk with tired eyes and a half-eaten sandwich on his desk. He took the folder, flipped through a few pages, and then stopped. You filled out your own affidavit? He asked. Every word? He nodded. It's solid. And then came the moment that stuck with me most. He passed me the signature page, and I picked up the pen. I'd signed my name 1,000 times before, on field trip permission slips, on birthday checks, on car payments, on bake sale forms, on the hospital release form when Lucas was born. But this signature, this one mattered, because it wasn't about someone else's need. It wasn't for a son or a school or a spouse. It was for me. My name, my voice, my decision. Florence May Westwood, not Mom, not Mrs., just me. On the way out, Clara squeezed my hand. "Proud of you." "I'm proud of me too," I said. And that wasn't something I used to say, not out loud, not even in my own head. But now, I had a piece of paper that said I existed in my own words, that I wasn't a shadow in someone else's narrative. I was the narrator now. That night, Clara and I made spaghetti. Nothing fancy, but she poured the wine and we toasted with chipped glasses like it was the 4th of July. "To bold signatures," she said. "And to quiet strength," I added. We laughed. Not because everything was fixed, but because something inside me had finally shifted. I no longer needed permission to speak. Later, as I was brushing my teeth, I caught my reflection in the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't look like someone's responsibility. I looked like a woman who knew her name and had finally written it bold enough for the world to read. Spring came quietly that year. One morning I woke up and the air had changed. The cold didn't bite as hard. The sky looked less gray. The tree outside Clara's apartment, the one with the crooked spine, had tiny green buds like soft punctuation marks. I sat by the window with my tea and watched a sparrow build its nest in the eaves. That bird had no idea what kind of world it was stepping into, but it built anyway. I'd been living with Clara for almost 5 months, not as a guest, not as a burden, just as Florence. I paid part of the rent now, not because Clara needed it, but because I liked seeing my name on things again. The lease, the mailbox, the light bill. There was something sacred about it, something healing about being known by name, not role. Lucas never came back. After the court processed my affidavit, he got quiet. I heard he closed his business, moved to another county. I never heard from Melissa again either. Clara said she saw her name pop up on a job listing board for a caregiver license. Revoked. Funny, isn't it? How some endings come not with slamming doors, but with no more footsteps at all. I didn't throw anything away. Not the folder, not the letters, not even the dog food can. I keep it all in a wooden box under the bed, not as a shrine to pain, but as evidence that I didn't imagine it. Sometimes when old guilt creeps in like fog, I take it out and remind myself, this happened, and I survived, and I didn't scream, but I spoke. Clara printed out a photo of me from that day at the courthouse, the one where I stood on the steps with a small smile and my shoulders straight. She framed it and put it next to the TV. "So you don't forget who you are," she said. I didn't need the frame to remember, but I kept it anyway. One Sunday afternoon, Clara had a few friends over, young women full of fire and opinions, laughing about bad dates and broken leases and overpriced oat milk. One of them looked at me and said, "Clara says you're kind of a badass." I smiled. "Well," I said, "I didn't start out that way." They leaned in. So I told them. Not every detail, just enough. The dog food, the locked fridge, the papers, the quiet fight, the signature. By the end, they were quiet. Then one of them whispered, "That's the most powerful revenge story I've ever heard." I shook my head. "It's not a revenge story," I said. "It's a rescue story. I just happened to rescue myself." These days, I volunteer at the senior center down the street. Twice a week, I help women with forms, Medicare, wills, rent support. I show them how to read the small print, how to ask the right questions, how to not apologize for taking up space. Some of them cry, some just nod, but all of them leave knowing what I took too long to learn. You are not crazy. You are not dramatic, and your signature still means something. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. Maybe quiet, maybe loud, But I know whatever happens, I'll walk into it as myself. No more whispering, no more shrinking, no more hoping someone else will rewrite the story. Because I've learned something in these 7 decades. The most powerful thing a woman can do is stay exactly who she is and make peace with that being enough. I know some of you are still watching, still listening. Maybe you've been through something like this. Maybe someone once told you, "You're imagining it. You're overreacting. You should be grateful." So let me ask you, have you ever been made to feel invisible in your own home? If so, would you share your story in the comments or simply type, "I see you," because someone else might need to know they're not the only one. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to fight to be free. Sometimes just signing your own name is enough.